Hi and welcome to my channel, or welcome back. So this is my mid-June wrap up video, and this is where I'll be talking about all of the books that I finished in June so far. It's the middle of June, duh. And I have finished 5 books as of today, and I am very excited to share with you all the things I want to share with you about these books, because my feelings about these books are it's of a very wide range. Some of them I really loved, some of them I just did not like, and I also have a book that I just sort of feel kind of in the middle about. So I'm going to start with the first one, and that would be The Color Purple by Alice Walker, which is a modern classic, and I've had this book for quite a while now in my book pile. However, for some reason I have not I did not read it. I don't know why, but I was glad that I did, and it was so good. And I even managed to finish it like in 2 days, or at least 2 days, 2 to 3 days, because it was just really good. So this book is an epistolary novel written by Alice Walker. It's an epistolary novel, and it's about this character named Sally, who is a black woman living in the American South, sometime in the beginning of 20th century, and the story takes place from that time all the way until the 40s, I think. And we see, and the story is structured as a series of letters written by Sally to God, or at least that's how it starts out in this book. So the story begins by showing us how Sally is repeatedly raped by a man whom she calls her father, and as a result of these rapes she has been pregnant, and she has 2 children which she has to give away because she is still a young teenager. And after that she is forced to marry another man who would turn out to be quite abusive to her as well. And so definitely quite a lot of harrowing experience experienced by this character in her young age, that it definitely influences how she sees herself, how she sees the world as a black woman in that time period. At the same time, this book also touches upon the queer experience, because Sally, as she later discovers, is attracted to women, and she is attracted to this particular woman named Shug, and she is really enamored by her, and eventually she meets her in person, and that also sort of introduces a new element that would definitely shift the trajectory of her life. So what I like about this book is that it does not sugarcoat the bad experience that Sally has in this book. It shows it how it is, and it feels very honest, and at the same time it is not the kind of writing in which you read it and then you feel that yes, this character is experiencing all these horrible things, and I as a reader sort of feel good about reading about such experience, those kinds of writing that sort of pushes you towards that direction. No, this book is not like that, and so you definitely feel uncomfortable as well. So definitely, if you feel uncomfortable about things like sexual assault, rape, racism, definitely this book is going to make you feel uncomfortable. So yeah, definitely something to consider if you're interested in reading this book. But at the same time, I also feel that this book is not something you would call a trauma porn. It does not like shove into you all of these bad things that happen to Sally, but rather it shows you as it is, but at the same time it also shows you the response that Sally produces, how she reacts to all of these things, how she sees herself as a result of all of these things happening to her, how she processes things, and the kinds of mental hurdles, but also the systemic hurdles that she has to overcome in order to sort of just live as a black woman in that time period. So in a way, this book has that sort of triumphant moments as well, but it is not a book that would necessarily just make you feel good, you know, make you feel like a good person for reading a book about marginalized people, you know. It is definitely a book that made me sad. I mean, I didn't cry, but I sort of felt a little bit of pressure in my eyes towards the end of this book, so I like a book that can do that to me. And also this book is written in dialects, and I really like that because I guess I usually sub-vocalize when I read books, and so when I do read a book that is written in dialects, I can sort of hear the sounds in my head, even though I don't speak the dialect, I don't use the slang and all that, but I can sort of hear the voice. And so as a result, this book has a very interesting and very unique, distinct voice to it, which is definitely something that I appreciate in a book as well. So definitely is a very wonderful book. Highly recommend it to everyone out there. So the second book that I have finished is A Pale View of Hills by Kazuo Ishiguro, which is Ishiguro's first novel, and this book was published in the 80s, 1982. So this is actually my second Kazuo Ishiguro. The first one was Never Let Me Go, and I actually read that like many years ago. So yeah, I still have quite a few unread Ishiguros in my pile, so definitely would want to get into those later on. So this book, I sort of feel kind of okay about it. I mean, I wasn't really like wowed by it, but this book is by no means a bad book. So this book is about this woman named Etsuko, and in the beginning of this novel we see how Etsuko, as an older woman living in England with her second daughter Nikki, whom she conceived with her second husband, who is an Englishman. And we also learn that Etsuko has experienced something bad in the past, in the near past. Her first daughter, named Keiko, has committed suicide, although we are left with the mystery of why. And so after we learn about those surface information, we go back to Etsuko's past in Nagasaki sometime in the 50s, and we learn about her relationship with her father-in-law, the father of her first husband, who is a Japanese, and also the father to Keiko. But most importantly, we also learn about the second relationship that she has in Nagasaki, which is her friendship with another woman, a mother named Sachiko, who has a daughter named Mariko. And Sachiko and Mariko sort of has this, they sort of have this road relationship with each other, because Sachiko is sort of moving around. She starts out, or at least she, in her earlier life, has experienced a more comfortable life, but when Etsuko gets acquainted with her, she is sort of living in this kind of like destitute life. And that sort of suggests that Sachiko has been moving around in through different stations in life and sort of dragged Mariko around with her as well. And Mariko is a, you could say that she's sort of a troubled kid as well, someone who doesn't really communicate very well, and someone who sort of just does her own thing and doesn't really listen to her mom and stuff like that. And we learn more about what happens to Sachiko and Mariko and what would happen to them later on, which would definitely have some parallels with what we see with Etsuko's own experience with her own daughters. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but when I got to the ending of this book, the way that this book is structured, it does feel like it's going to be kind of complicated, super nuanced, but as it turns out, it is actually about something that is quite simple. It is about something that is quite easy to understand, and then when you realize it, you're gonna feel like, oh yeah, you understand it. So yeah, that's kind of the interesting part about this book. Overall, I thought that the writing sort of meanders a little bit. It does have that, a bit of that similar vibes to Never Let Me Go, which is, that kind of longing or nostalgic vibe. I mean, the character is thinking about her past in this book, so literally it's nostalgic. But I feel that this is a book that you would definitely benefit more from it if you think about it more after you finish this book, because definitely I would say right after finishing this book, I wasn't really feeling the impact, but it only came a bit after that. So yeah, that's my suggestion with this book. It's a nice book, so definitely would recommend to everybody as well. Now, the third book that I finished was a short book, but I did not like it at all. And this is by Muriel Spark. It's called The Driver's Seat. Now, I read The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie sometime last year, I think it was last year. And I liked it. I think that was really interesting. The character work is, the work done on the characters are so interesting. And you get to see like so many layers being introduced with the characters. So yeah, that book was quite good. I like that book. This one not so much. So this book is about a woman named Lise. She is preparing to go for a trip, a vacation trip somewhere, to find a man that would fit her type. Basically, she would find a lover, I think. And on her way, she, at the beginning of this book, when we are introduced to Lise as a character, she is in a clothing store choosing clothes that she would wear for the vacation. And after browsing in different stores, she ends up buying this like really gaudy selection of outfit with really garish colors that would just turn people's heads in like this wrong way. So that was actually quite amusing to me, because we are introduced to this character who is just quite eccentric, at least kind of strange, and she also treats people in this like really unfriendly manner. And yeah, definitely a character that I was really interested in. And when she gets into when she actually goes to that trip, we also see her description, the description on how she interacts with the people that she encounters in that trip as well, and how she keeps on telling people that she's going to find that man, the man who is who fits her type, and at the same time, interwoven in all of these. This part of narrative, we are also getting glimpses of what will happen later in that trip, which is how she's going to be found dead by stabbing. So yeah, that's not a spoiler. That part is right there in the beginning, and it's the foreshadowing is all there, repeatedly given to you, that Lise is going to be dead at the end. But we are left with the mystery, of course. Why is she dead? Or maybe who kills her? Well, I think this book is definitely more on the why rather than who, because we definitely see who kills her at the end, but we don't really know the why. However, while I thought that was quite interesting of a concept by itself, I think that the writing is just not working for me. One thing that just really rubs me the wrong way is that how this book is just filled with character interactions that just felt so unbelievable and does not make sense. Like how Lise can just literally talk to the people that she encounters in her trip as if she is familiar with them and they are familiar with her, even though they are supposedly strangers, and they just sort of do things or say things that just do not make sense to me, things that feel kind of, the kinds of things that you say or do to people you're familiar with. That's just one example. And Lise keeps on talking about how she's going to find this man who fits her type. That is repeated throughout this novel. And I feel that this book is sort of written probably not exactly through a realistic angle. Like, I think it is aware of that fact. But even so, while I would say that I like absurd books, and that, those details definitely sound absurd, it just does not feel very organic to me. It just doesn't feel natural, and so the writing, the story ends up feeling quite stilted. It's just that something is just, it feels kind of off kilter in this book, and it was tiring to read, to be honest. And gosh, yeah, definitely, even though it's a very short book, I think when I finished reading this book, I was left with zero stamina. Really, and so I gave this one star. Now, I think this book is probably trying to explore the idea of how we, or rather especially in the context of this book, how women, but I think it can also apply to everyone, like how we try so hard to plan for things exactly according our own way, but somehow at the end it just doesn't go the way we want it to be. Now, of course, I think that is also a very simplistic idea. I feel that this is a book that one can definitely unpack in multiple ways, even though it's very short. I think it could be punchy to different people, because apparently a lot of people gave this one 5 or 4 stars on Goodreads. And I definitely acknowledge that there is that idea over there, and I can sort of agree with the kinds of ideas that these reviews talk about in this book. I can definitely see, or at least get a glimpse of those ideas in this book. It's just that the writing or the story just does not fit with what I like at all. So 1 star. Anyway, after finishing that book, I read a short story collection, and this one is a translated fiction by Intan Paramaditha. It's called Apple and Knife, and this one was originally written in Indonesian and translated into English by Stephen J. Epstein. So this is a short story collection. Did I mention that? I think I mentioned it, but anyway, yeah, it's a short story collection. And what ties all of the stories together in this book is that the stories are generally feminist stories about women who act badly, or at least women who act in a rather bad way according to how society views them. I'm talking about women who are very confident, who flaunt their sexuality, who are confident with their bodies, or women who just pretty much do or work in an occupation that simply does not jibe well with the society where they live in. And in the case of this book, most of the stories are set in Indonesia, contemporary Indonesia, but there are also stories that are kind of like retelling of fairy tales, such as the first story, which is sort of like a retelling of Cinderella, but from the point of view of one of the stepsisters. And yeah, I really like this short story collection because of a few reasons. One, these stories, they really capture this vibe that you would normally see in in one of those pulpy stories that you could definitely read or find in the Nusantara region, which is like Malaysia, Singapore, Brunei, Indonesia. And one of those pulpy stories that feature characters who act badly or in sinful ways and sort of get their comeuppance through mystical means and stuff. And definitely many of the main characters in this book are women who are just do not fit the archetype of a perfect woman, of the polite woman that conservative societies in here expects women to be. And so it definitely catches that vibe, that sort of scandalous, lewd vibe, but at the same time, it sort of twists, the story sort of twisted in a different way, in which in those pulpy stories, usually you would see those women as the villains, or they are often vilified and they are often punished at the end. But in here, even though some of those women are sort of punished in the end, they are the protagonists, they are the main characters, and you can't help but to root for these characters because they are given motivation that really fits with who they are as a person, as humans, and really fits with the environment, the setting that they live in, and the challenge that they as a character has to deal with in their stories. So I really like that. It feels like you're reading the same type of stories, or similar type of stories, but now with a slightly different voice, with a slightly different angle, and the way you see the characters are shifted. Now, I feel that for readers who sort of grow up in an environment in which women are sort of viewed in, or at least expected to be like in certain ways, who are expected to be like virgins, pure, clean, whatnot, all of those things, would probably find the women in this book to be like really, really bad women. But I also think that if this short story collection were to feature male characters doing similar things as the women characters do in this novel, these male characters would probably be sort of just labeled as men with flaws, or roguish male characters, or roguish characters, not roguish male characters, roguish characters. And I can certainly get that vibe from this book. It feels like this book is trying to tell us that these women, they are just doing these things in order to, due to multiple motivations. Sometimes just because they want to sustain their life and stuff like that. Sometimes because they are repeatedly sexually harassed by other men in their lives, and so they do all of these things. It's questionable, of course, but you can definitely empathize with many of these characters in this book. A very nuanced book, but I definitely enjoy it so much. So I highly recommend this book. If you don't know about this book, definitely read it. Definitely get it. Although at the same time, this book also features a lot of disturbing imagery, because the short stories are kind of horror inspired. So definitely there are many scenes that are sort of gory, bloody, and maybe even can come across as disgusting to some readers. So definitely exercise caution if you are interested in reading this book. Trigger warnings definitely include stuff like sexual assault. That's a given in a short story collection such as this. Definitely a lot of bad treatments against women, definitely. And yeah, those are the main things that you need to watch out for. And also mental illness and deaths. So yeah, highly recommended. Really awesome book. So the final book I'm going to talk about in this video is this one, a translated fiction. Also, it's called The Phone Box at the Edge of the World. This is the edition that I have. A different edition could have a different title, and that would be The Phone Booth at the Edge of the World. I think it's the UK versus American edition. I'm not sure which one is which. But yeah, I guess they're the same thing. Anyway, so this book was originally written in Italian by Laura Imai Messina, and it was translated into English by Lucy Rand. And this book is about Yui, who is a woman living in Japan, and she has lost her daughter and mother in the March 2011 Japan tsunami incident. And so this book is sort of inspired by a true story about this telephone booth located in a garden named Belgardia. So Yui, who is still reeling from this loss of her daughter and mother, she's dealing with grief. And she, after hearing about the existence of a telephone booth in a garden in which grieving people can just sort of take the receiver and talk to the people that they lost in that telephone booth, she decides to go there and just sort of experience it for herself in order to deal with her loss. And in her pilgrimage to the garden with the telephone booth, she encounters a man who is also experiencing a loss of his own. He lost his wife, and they end up, being acquaintance with each other, and they sort of enter each other's life. So this book is definitely about grief, it's definitely about loss, and it's definitely about how a character process all of those things. And in the central to this book is definitely the telephone booth, which sort of acts as a way how many of the characters in this book process their grief. Now, this telephone booth, the telephone in there, it is not connected to anything. So it is described that when a character lifts the receiver and hears into it, they would sort of be hearing the wind and talk to the wind. So yeah, definitely something that it is kind of like an object that serves as a way for these characters to process their sadness. Now, I really love books about grief, about loss, and especially if those books write it well, I would be like so into those things, because chances are I would probably cry. But this book did not do that. Now, one of the issues that I find with this book is that there are many things that happen. It definitely has a plot concerning Yui and the man that she ends up meeting at the garden. And there's definitely a plot in how things unfold in each of their lives and how they intersect. But the writing in this book is actually quite sparse. Now, if you look at inside of it, the lines are like really far apart. So it's not exactly like a super thick book. You can actually sort of condense it into a thin book. It's generally it's pretty much a thin book. But because it uses so little words to describe what happens in the story of these characters, it feels very surface level. It doesn't get very deep. It feels too fast, and so I think the pacing really does not work. Now, another thing that this book does that I feel is sort of gimmicky is that the chapters are sort of alternating with sort of like a tidbit kind of a chapter. So you have one chapter which is written in traditional prose about the characters and what happens and what they do and stuff, the usual chapters. And after that chapter, there will be a very short chapter that is kind of like a list of what is being mentioned in the first in the preceding chapter, or maybe that chapter is going to be about the favorite songs of certain characters, or what such and such characters put into such and such lunchbox, those kinds of things. And I feel that the inclusion of those chapters sort of make this book feel like it's trying so hard to be quirky, and it doesn't work for me. Because it takes a lot away from the writing about the grief and the loss and the sadness. It wants to write about how characters are processing their grief, but at the same time it is also these list chapters, they introduce a different kind of vibe into this book, this kind of happy, joyful, positive, feel good, pastel vibe, quirky feeling into this book that I think it really sort of dilutes all of those punchy aspects of this book. And so as a result, I don't feel anything about the characters. I feel that they are sort of wishy-washy, that they are just stand-ins for, kind of like generic character who is experiencing a loss. I don't feel that they are an actual human character with human characteristics, except for what we are told about what they like, what they do and stuff. I feel that overall this is a pretty weak book, and I don't really like it. It's not something that I would highly recommend to everyone. If you are interested, definitely try this book. Maybe it will work differently for you. But if you're not the kind of person who loves really sappy and saccharine story, definitely not something that I would suggest you try. So yeah, this one did not work for me. Anyway, those are all the books that I finished so far in June, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe. Anyway, bye bye.